47 minutes. That's all Alara Vale had left before her entire world collapsed in front of the whole town. Her hands shook as she pushed through the tavern door, scanning the smoky room for anyone desperate or foolish enough to help her. Because in less than an hour, Cedric Halewyn would arrive with his perfect bride, his smug smile, and a contract that would destroy her family forever. Unless she could prove she belonged to someone else. Unless she could find a man willing to lie convincingly enough to fool a nobleman, a crowd, and fate itself. That's when she saw him, sitting alone in the shadows, watching her like he'd been waiting all along. She had no idea what she was about to unleash. If you want to see how a desperate lie became the most powerful bond in the realm, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your city, and let's dive into a story of courage, deception, and a queen who rose from absolute nothing. The wind howled through Thornwood like a living thing, rattling shutters and scattering dust across the cobblestones. Alara Vale stood in the middle of the village square, her cloak whipping around her legs, staring at the horizon where the road disappeared into forest shadow. Somewhere out there, rolling closer with every passing minute, was the carriage that would ruin everything. 47 minutes. She'd checked the church tower clock 3 times in the last 10 minutes, as if staring at it might slow the hands. It didn't. Time moved forward with cruel efficiency, dragging her toward humiliation she couldn't escape. Alara. She turned. Her younger sister Mira stood in the doorway of their cottage, pale and hollow-eyed. "Mama's asking for you." Alara's jaw tightened. "Tell her I'm handling it." "How?" Mira's voice cracked. "How are you handling it? Cedric's coming, Alara. He's bringing her, and Papa still doesn't have the gold." "I know." "Then what are you going to do?" Alara didn't answer. Because the truth was, she had no idea. All she had was a half-formed plan born of desperation and rage, and less than an hour to make it work. The contract had been signed 3 years ago, back when Cedric Halewyn had been a charming young merchant's son with kind eyes and promises of a future. Back when Alara had believed that love could bloom between two people who wanted different things. She'd been 17, naive, hopeful. The dowry had been agreed upon. 20 gold sovereigns, a fortune for a healer's family in a border town where coin was scarce and survival was hard-won. Her father had promised to pay it within 3 years, confident that his trade in medicinal herbs would flourish. It hadn't. A blight had swept through the region 2 summers ago, killing half the harvest. Then her father had fallen ill, his hands too weak to work the mortar and pestle. Alara had taken over the healing work, but even her skill couldn't turn dried roots into gold. They'd scraped together 9 sovereigns. Not enough. Not nearly enough. And then, 6 months ago, Cedric had written to break the engagement. He'd found someone better, a merchant's daughter from the southern cities, a woman with a proper dowry and connections that would elevate his family's status. He was sorry. He'd written in crisp, formal script, but surely Alara understood. Business was business. She'd felt relief. The engagement had been a mistake, a mismatch born of youthful optimism. She'd wished him well and prepared to move on. Then the second letter arrived. Cedric's family intended to collect the dowry anyway. Contract law was clear. The agreement had been signed, the terms set. If the Vale family couldn't pay, their property would be seized. The cottage, the healing shop, everything. Alara had read that letter 3 times before the rage set in. He was coming back to Thornwood. Not to apologize, not to release them from the contract. To collect. To humiliate her in front of the entire town, to prove that a healer's daughter wasn't worth the cost of keeping her word. And he was bringing his bride. Because of course he was. Mira touched her arm, pulling her back to the present. "Alara, please. Maybe if you talk to him." "Talk to him?" Alara's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You think Cedric Halewyn cares about words? He's coming here to prove a point, Mira, to show everyone that we're beneath him, that I'm beneath him." "Then what can we do?" Alara looked at her sister's frightened face and felt something harden inside her chest. Mira was 16. She shouldn't have to worry about losing her home because of a contract signed before she could read. Their mother was bedridden, their father broken. If Alara didn't act, they would lose everything. "I'm going to fix this," Alara said quietly. "How?" "I don't know yet, but I will." She turned and walked away before Mira could ask more questions she couldn't answer. The Broken Wheel Tavern sat at the edge of the square, a squat stone building that smelled of smoke, old beer, and desperation. It was the kind of place where travelers stopped for a night before moving on, where locals drank away their frustrations, and where secrets were traded as freely as coin. Alara pushed through the heavy oak door and was immediately hit by a wall of noise and heat. The tavern was packed: farmers, traders, a few off-duty soldiers from the border garrison. Conversations roared over the crackle of the fireplace. Somewhere in the back, someone was singing badly. She scanned the room, searching for what? She didn't even know. Someone desperate enough to help her. Someone willing to lie for coin. Someone she could trust for exactly one night. Her gaze swept past the bar, past the tables crowded with familiar faces, and snagged on a figure sitting alone in the far corner. A man. Tall, even-seated. Dark hair that fell just past his collar. He wore a traveler's cloak, well-made but unremarkable, and he sat with his back to the wall, watching the room with the calm, patient focus of a predator. Alara felt something strange stir in her chest. Recognition, maybe. Or warning. She didn't know him. She'd never seen him before, but something about the way he sat, perfectly still, perfectly aware, made her think he'd been waiting. For what? She had no idea. She crossed the room before she could talk herself out of it. The closer she got, the more details she noticed. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes that tracked her approach with unsettling precision. He was handsome in a dangerous way, like a blade disguised as decoration. When she stopped in front of his table, he didn't speak, just looked at her with those steady, unreadable eyes. Alara swallowed. "I need your help." One dark eyebrow lifted. "Do you?" His voice was low, smooth, with an accent she couldn't place. Not local. Not from the borderlands at all. "I'll pay you," she said quickly. "Not much. I don't have much. But I can sit." It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with such quiet authority that Alara found herself sinking into the chair across from him before she'd consciously decided to obey. He studied her for a long moment, and she had the unnerving sensation of being seen, not just looked at, but understood in a way that stripped away pretense. "You're the healer," he said finally. She blinked. "How did you—" "Small town. People talk." He tilted his head slightly. "You're Alara Vale. Your father used to run the apothecary before his hands gave out. You took over 3 years ago. You're good at what you do, better than most trained physicians." Alara's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" "Someone passing through." He leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed. "What do you need, Alara Vale?" She hesitated. Saying it out loud would make it real, make her desperate and foolish and reckless. But she was out of time. "I need you to pretend to be my mate," she said. The words landed between them like stones. For 3 long seconds, the man didn't react. Then, slowly, a smile curved the corner of his mouth. Not mocking. Something darker. More interested. "Explain." So she did. She told him about Cedric, about the contract, about the dowry her family couldn't pay, and the humiliation that was 43 minutes away. She told him about the clause in the contract that voided the agreement if she was claimed by another before collection. She told him she needed someone to stand beside her, to touch her, to lie convincingly enough to make Cedric leave empty-handed. When she finished, the stranger was silent. "One night," Alara pressed, "just long enough to fool him, then you walk away and I'll never ask anything of you again. And if he doesn't believe it, he will. He has to." Why me?" Alara met his gaze. "Because you look like someone who knows how to lie." That earned her a low, genuine laugh. "Fair. Will you do it?" He considered her for a moment that stretched too long. Then he leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. The shift brought him closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "What's your offer?" he asked. 5 silver? Make it 10. "I don't have 10. "Then you'll owe me." His smile sharpened. "I'm sure we can work something out." Alara's instinct screamed warning. This man was dangerous. She could feel it in the way he moved, in the way he watched her, in the quiet confidence that radiated from him like heat. But she was out of options. "Fine," she said. 10 silver. After." "Agreed." He stood, unfolding from the chair with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime moving through the world like he owned it. He was taller than she'd expected, easily over 6 feet, and when he looked down at her, she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "I'm Rowan," he said, offering his hand. She took it. His grip was firm, warm, and something electric shot up her arm at the contact. She pulled away quickly. "We don't have much time," she said, trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. "Cedric will be here any minute. We need to get our story straight." "Then lead the way, Alara Vale." "What?" He said her name like he was tasting it, like he already knew how it would sound in the dark. Alara turned and walked toward the door, very aware of the stranger, Rowan, following behind her. She'd just made a deal with a man she didn't know, didn't trust, and couldn't read. She had no idea she'd just invited a king to stand beside her, and in 39 minutes, the entire realm would change. They stood in the narrow alley behind the tavern, hidden from the square but close enough to hear the growing murmur of the crowd. Word had spread. Half of Thornwood had gathered to watch the spectacle. Rowan leaned against the stone wall, arms crossed, watching her pace. "Stop," he said. "I can't. You're going to wear a hole in the ground." Alara shot him a glare. "This is my life, Rowan, my family's future. Forgive me if I'm a little nervous." "Nervous won't help you. Calm will." "Easy for you to say." "Is it?" He pushed off the wall and closed the distance between them in 2 strides. Suddenly, he was right there, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You think I don't understand what it's like to face someone who wants to break you?" There was something raw in his voice, something that didn't match the easy confidence he'd worn in the tavern. "Who are you?" Alara asked quietly. "Right now?" Rowan's smile returned, sharp and controlled. "I'm yours. That's all that matters." Before she could respond, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, familiar, exactly the kind of thing a lover would do. Alara's breath caught. "We need to be convincing," Rowan said softly. "That means you need to trust me. Can you do that?" She should say no. She should pull away, find someone else, come up with a better plan. But his hand was still near her face, and his eyes were steady, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel alone. "Yes," she whispered. "Good." He stepped back, and the moment broke. "Now, tell me about Cedric. What kind of man is he?" Alara forced herself to focus. "Proud? Arrogant? He cares about appearances more than anything else. He's not coming here for the gold. He's coming to prove he's better than me." "Then we'll prove him wrong." Rowan's voice was cold now, calculating. "When he arrives, stay close to me. Let me do the talking. And whatever happens, don't flinch." "What are you going to do?" His smile was all teeth. "Whatever it takes." A bell chimed in the distance, the church tower, marking the hour. Cedric had arrived. The crowd parted as Alara and Rowan stepped into the square. Conversations died. All eyes turned toward them. Alara's stomach twisted, but she kept her chin high and her hand steady in Rowan's. His grip was strong, grounding, and when he glanced down at her, there was something reassuring in his gaze. "You're not alone," it seemed to say. "Not anymore." At the far end of the square, a polished carriage rolled to a stop. The door opened and Cedric Halewind stepped out. He looked exactly as Alara remembered, tall, clean-shaven, dressed in expensive fabrics that announced his wealth. Handsome, if you like that sort of polished, empty charm. Behind him, a young woman in an elaborate gown descended carefully, her hand resting on his arm. The bride. Cedric's gaze swept the square, dismissive and bored, until it landed on Alara. His expression shifted. Surprise. Confusion. Then something darker. He started toward her, his bride trailing behind. Rowan's hand tightened on Alara's. "Steady," he murmured. Cedric stopped 3 feet away, his gaze flicking between Alara and the stranger at her side. "Alara, I see you've found company." "Cedric." Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "You're early." "I prefer punctuality." His smile was thin. "I trust you have the dowry?" "I have something better." Cedric's eyebrow arched. "Do you?" Alara took a breath. This was it, the moment everything hinged on. "This is Rowan," she said clearly. her voice carrying across the silent square. My mate. The words hit like a thunderclap. Cedric's face went carefully blank. Your mate. Yes. How convenient. His tone dripped sarcasm. And when exactly did this arrangement occur? 4 months ago, Rowan said. His voice cut through the tension like a blade, calm, confident, utterly unbothered. He shifted his stance slightly, and suddenly he wasn't just standing beside Alara. He was claiming her, his presence wrapping around her like armor. Cedric's eyes narrowed. I don't believe you. I don't care what you believe, Rowan replied evenly. The contract is void. Alara belongs to me now. You have no claim here. Belongs to... Cedric's laugh was sharp. Who the hell do you think you are? Rowan smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Someone you don't want to challenge. The temperature in the square seemed to drop 10 degrees. Cedric stared at Rowan, and for the first time uncertainty flickered across his face. Because whatever he saw in the stranger's eyes, it wasn't doubt. It wasn't fear. It was power, cold, absolute, and undeniable. Cedric? His bride tugged at his sleeve, her voice nervous. Perhaps we should... No. Cedric's jaw set stubbornly. I want proof. If they're truly bonded, let them prove it. Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. We don't have to prove anything to you. Contract law says otherwise. Cedric's smile returned, vicious now. A mate bond is sacred, unbreakable. If you truly share one, then a kiss will show it. The bond will answer. Alara's blood ran cold. She'd been counting on words, on posture, on the threat Rowan carried like a second skin. She hadn't expected this. Because Cedric was right. A true mate bond would flare at a kiss, visible to anyone with eyes. A mark of claim that couldn't be faked. And she and Rowan were strangers. There was no bond, no connection, just a lie. They were about to be exposed in front of the entire town. Rowan turned to her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he lifted one hand and cupped her face. Trust me, he whispered, and he kissed her. The world shattered. That's the only way Alara could describe it later. The moment Rowan's lips touched hers, something inside her chest broke open, spilling heat and light, and a connection so fierce it stole the breath from her lungs. It wasn't the kiss itself, though that was devastating in its own right, controlled and claiming and absolutely certain. It was what came after. A flare of golden light erupted between them, visible even through closed eyelids. Alara gasped against Rowan's mouth, and she felt him go utterly still, his hand tightening on her face. The bond mark appeared on her skin like fire, a delicate swirling pattern that traced from her collarbone up the side of her neck, glowing faintly in the afternoon sun. And on Rowan's throat, just above his collar, an identical mark blazed to life. The crowd erupted in shock. Cedric stumbled backward, his face pale, because what had just appeared between them wasn't a performance, wasn't a trick. It was a true mate bond, the rarest, most sacred connection in the realm. Undeniable, unbreakable, witnessed by heaven and earth. Rowan pulled back slowly, his dark eyes locked on Alara's. She saw shock there, and something else, something that looked like recognition. Well, he said quietly, his voice rough. That's unexpected. Alara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. The stranger she'd hired to lie for her wasn't a stranger at all. He was her mate, and judging by the stunned look on his face, he hadn't known either. The silence that followed was absolute. Alara stood frozen in the center of the square, her lips still burning from the kiss, her entire body vibrating with a connection she didn't understand. The golden mark on her neck pulsed faintly, warm against her skin, visible to everyone who stared. And they were all staring. Rowan's hand was still on her face, his thumb resting against her jaw. His expression had shifted from controlled confidence to something rawer, more dangerous. His dark eyes searched hers, and she saw the same shock she felt mirrored back at her. He hadn't known. Neither of them had known. That's not possible, Cedric's voice cracked through the silence, high and strained. You can't just... The mark doesn't lie, boy. Old Thomas, the blacksmith, stepped forward from the crowd. His weathered face was alight with wonder. I've lived 60 years and only seen a true mate bond twice. That's the real thing. Murmurs rippled through the gathered villagers. Alara heard the words passing from mouth to mouth. Mate bond. True claim. Marked by fate itself. Cedric's bride clutched his arm, her painted face pale. Cedric, we should leave. No. He shook her off, his gaze fixed on Alara, with something ugly twisting his features. This is a trick, some kind of spell or illusion. Healers know herbs that can cause hallucinations. Are you calling the entire village mad? Rowan's voice cut through Cedric's stammering like a blade through silk. He finally dropped his hand from Alara's face and turned to face the nobleman fully. The shift in his posture was subtle but devastating. Something about the way he stood changed. His shoulders squared, his chin lifted slightly, and suddenly the air around him seemed to thicken with authority. Cedric took an involuntary step backward. The contract is void, Rowan continued, his tone conversational but edged with steel. Alara Vale is mine. Marked. Claimed. Witnessed by your own eyes and the eyes of this entire town. You have no legal standing here, no claim, no right. He paused, letting the words sink in. Leave, now, before you embarrass yourself further. Red crept up Cedric's neck. You don't give me orders. I don't even know who you are. Some vagrant she found in a tavern. Careful. The single word dropped like a stone. Rowan took one step forward, just one. But something in that movement made Cedric flinch, made his bride gasp, made half the crowd collectively hold their breath. Because suddenly, unmistakably, they could all feel it. Power. Not the social power of wealth or title. Something older, deeper. The kind of dominance that didn't need to be announced because it simply was. Alara felt it wash over her like a wave, overwhelming and absolute. Her knees nearly buckled. Rowan wasn't just dangerous. He was something else entirely. Get back in your carriage, Rowan said softly. Take your bride. Return to whatever soft, comfortable life you've built for yourself. And be grateful I'm letting you leave with your pride intact. Cedric's jaw worked. For a moment, Alara thought he might actually argue, might push back against the stranger who'd appeared from nowhere and shattered his plans. But then his survival instincts kicked in. This isn't over, he said, but the words were hollow. A desperate attempt to salvage dignity that was already lost. Yes, Rowan replied. It is. Cedric grabbed his bride's arm and practically dragged her back to the carriage. The driver, pale and sweating despite the cool air, snapped the reins before his employer had fully closed the door. The carriage lurched forward, wheels clattering over cobblestones, and within seconds it had disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust. The crowd erupted. Questions flew from every direction. Old Thomas clapped Rowan on the shoulder. Martha from the bakery grabbed Alara's hands, tears streaming down her weathered face. Young Jamie pushed forward, asking if he could touch the mate mark, convinced it would bring him luck. Through it all, Alara felt disconnected, floating, like she was watching the scene unfold from somewhere far away. Her sister Mira broke through the crowd, throwing her arms around Alara's waist. You did it! Alara, you actually did it! Alara's voice wouldn't work properly. I didn't. The cottage is saved! We're saved! Mira pulled back, her young face radiant with relief and joy. When did you meet him? How did you hide this? Why didn't you tell us? Alara opened her mouth, but no words came out, because the truth was impossible. Insane. She'd met Rowan 45 minutes ago. He'd been a stranger, a hired actor meant to play a part for one single night, and now she bore his mark. Now they were bound by something that couldn't be undone, couldn't be explained, couldn't be denied. Rowan's hand settled on her lower back, warm and grounding through the fabric of her dress. She's overwhelmed, he told Mira gently. It's been a difficult day. Perhaps we should— Of course, Martha bustled forward. You poor dears must be exhausted. Come, let's get you inside, away from all these nosy fools. She shot a pointed look at the crowd, which reluctantly began to disperse, though Alara could feel their eyes following her. Rowan guided her through the thinning crowd, his hand never leaving her back. They walked in silence, Mira chattering excitedly beside them, until they reached the small cottage at the edge of the square. The moment they crossed the threshold, everything Alara had been holding back crashed over her. She rounded on Rowan, her voice shaking. What the hell just happened? He closed the door, cutting off Mira's startled exclamation, and leaned against it. His face was unreadable. I think you know. No, I don't. This isn't possible. We're strangers. We can't. She gestured helplessly at her neck, where the mark still glowed faintly. This doesn't just happen. Apparently it does. Don't. Alara's hands clenched into fists. Don't you dare act calm about this. You're not calm. I can see it in your eyes. Rowan's jaw tightened. What do you want me to say, Alara? That I'm confused? Shocked? That this is the last thing I expected when I agreed to help you? He pushed off the door, crossing the small room in 3 strides. Fine. I'm all of those things. But the mark is real. The bond is real. And standing here panicking about it won't change that. Then what will? Her voice cracked. How do we fix this? Something flickered across his face. Fix it? Yes, this was supposed to be temporary, fake. You were supposed to pretend for one night and then leave, not this. She touched her neck, feeling the raised pattern beneath her fingers. It was warm, alive, undeniably real. Rowan went very still. You want to break it? It wasn't a question. Alara met his gaze and something in her chest twisted at the careful blankness she found there. I want to understand it. This morning I was a healer's daughter with a debt problem. Now I'm marked by a stranger I met in a tavern. So yes, Rowan, or whoever you are, I want to know what the hell is happening to my life. Silence stretched between them. Then Rowan said quietly, Sit down. I don't want to, Sit down. The authority in his voice was impossible to resist. Alara sank into one of the worn chairs by the cold fireplace. Rowan remained standing, his arms crossed, looking at her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. A true mate bond can't be faked, he began. Can't be forced, can't be manufactured with spells or potions or desperate wishes. It exists before the mark appears, before the kiss, before the recognition. He paused. We were always meant to find each other, Alara. Today just happened to be when the bond decided to reveal itself. That's insane. Is it? You felt something when you first saw me, didn't you? In the tavern, before you even spoke to me. Alara wanted to deny it, but she couldn't, because he was right. She'd felt something, a pull, a recognition that had made her cross that crowded room and ask a complete stranger for help when she had no reason to trust him. This doesn't make sense, she whispered. Mate bonds are rare, special. They happen to important people, leaders, warriors, not healers from border towns. Who told you that? Everyone. The stories, the histories. The stories are wrong. Rowan crouched in front of her chair, bringing himself to eye level. The bond doesn't care about status or bloodlines or what others think you deserve. It cares about souls, about compatibility, about finding the one person in this whole damn world who can stand beside you as an equal. His hand reached out, hesitating just before touching her face. May I? Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. His fingers traced the mate mark on her neck, following the swirling pattern with careful precision. Everywhere he touched, warmth bloomed, and that strange connection between them pulsed stronger. It's beautiful, he murmured. I've never seen one quite like this. How many have you seen? Enough to know that yours is unique. His thumb brushed her jaw. The question isn't whether this is real, Alara. It is. The question is what we do about it. Before she could respond, the cottage door burst open. Mira stood in the doorway, her face flushed with excitement. They're asking for you both at the tavern. Everyone wants to celebrate. The baker's bringing out his special mead, and... She stopped, noticing the tense atmosphere. Is everything all right? Fine, Alara said automatically. We just need a moment. No. Rowan stood smoothly. Your sister's right. The town is expecting a celebration. If we hide, they'll wonder why. I can't go out there and pretend. Then don't pretend. His dark eyes locked on hers. Accept it. For tonight, at least. We can figure out the rest tomorrow. It was a reasonable suggestion. Smart, even. The village had witnessed a miracle. Or what they believed to be a miracle. Refusing to celebrate would raise questions neither of them could afford to answer. But the thought of standing in that crowded tavern, of accepting congratulations for a bond she didn't understand, of playing the role of devoted mate to a man who was still fundamentally a stranger. "Please," Mira said softly. "Mama will want to meet him, and Papa needs to know the cottage is safe." The cottage. Her family. The whole reason she'd gone looking for help in the first place. Alora closed her eyes briefly, then stood. "Fine, but just for an hour." "An hour," Rowan agreed, though something in his tone suggested he knew it would be longer. The Broken Wheel Tavern had transformed in the 40 minutes since Cedric's retreat. Candles blazed on every surface. Tables had been pushed together to create one long communal space. The baker had indeed brought out his special mead, the expensive stuff he saved for weddings and harvests, and someone had convinced old Sarah to bring out her fiddle. The moment Alara and Rowan entered, a cheer erupted. "To the bonded pair! May your union be long and fruitful." "About time someone put that pompous Hailwind in his place." Cups raised. Mead flowed, and Alara found herself swept into a celebration she'd never asked for. Martha pushed a cup into her hand. "Drink, dear. You look like you've seen a ghost." "I feel like I have," Alara muttered, but she drank anyway. The mead was sweet and strong, burning pleasantly down her throat. Rowan stayed close, his hand finding her waist or her shoulder or the small of her back with easy familiarity. To everyone watching, they looked like a perfectly matched pair, him dark and dangerous, her bright and determined. The bond mark on both their necks glowed faintly in the candlelight, visible proof of their connection. It was perfect. It was a lie built on an impossible truth. "So," old Thomas settled beside them, his weathered face curious. "How did you two meet? I know you said 4 months ago, but give us the story. We love a good romance." Alara's mind went blank, but Rowan smiled easily, his arm tightening around her waist. "I was passing through on my way north. My horse threw a shoe just outside town. The blacksmith was busy, told me to come back in the morning." He glanced down at Alara, and there was something almost genuine in his expression. "I stopped at the apothecary for supplies, and there she was, mixing some foul-smelling potion and arguing with a patient about proper dosing." "It wasn't foul-smelling," Alara said automatically. "It was willow bark tea. It smelled like old socks." Despite everything, she felt her lips twitch. "You're not wrong." The people around them chuckled. "I knew the moment I saw her," Rowan continued, his voice dropping lower. "More intimate. Couldn't explain it, couldn't rationalize it. I just knew." The way he said it made it sound true, made it sound like he'd walked into that apothecary 4 months ago and found his entire world shift on its axis. Maybe, in a strange way, he had. Just not when he claimed. "And you?" Martha asked Alara. "What did you think of this handsome stranger?" Alara looked up at Rowan, at this man she'd met less than 2 hours ago, who now bore her mark and played the role of devoted mate with unsettling ease. "I thought he was trouble," she said honestly. Rowan's smile sharpened. "I am. But the good kind," she added, because that's what they needed to hear. More cheers, more toasts. The celebration grew louder as the mead continued to flow. Alara felt herself relaxing slightly, falling into the rhythm of the fiction they were weaving. It helped that Rowan was good at this, at reading the room, at knowing exactly what to say and when to touch her, at making the lie feel real. She wondered where he'd learned it, who he'd practiced on, what his real story was. Because men didn't move through the world with that kind of confidence unless they'd earned it, didn't command rooms with a glance unless they were used to being obeyed. Rowan wasn't just a traveler, she'd bet her life on it. The question was, what was he? "Alara." Her mother's voice, thin and trembling, cut through the noise. Alara turned to see her mother being helped through the crowd by Mira. Her mother looked frail in the candlelight, her illness evident in the hollows of her cheeks and the shake of her hands. But her eyes were bright with tears. "Mama." Alara started forward. "Let me see him." His mother's gaze fixed on Rowan with an intensity that made Alara's stomach clench. "Let me see the man who saved my daughter." Rowan bowed slightly, graceful and respectful. "Ma'am." Alara's mother studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, she reached out and touched the mate mark on his throat. He went very still. Alara held her breath. "You'll protect her," her mother said. It wasn't a question. With my life, Rowan replied without hesitation. You'll honor her, cherish her. Never make her regret this bond. Something flickered in Rowan's eyes. Guilt, maybe, or understanding. I swear it. Alara's mother smiled, tears spilling down her cheeks. Then welcome to our family, son. She pulled Rowan into an embrace that he accepted with surprising gentleness. Over her mother's shoulder, his gaze found Alara's. The weight of that promise, with my life, hung between them. Because it wasn't just a promise to her mother. The mate bond had heard it, had sealed it into something binding. Whatever happened next, Rowan couldn't walk away from her. And she couldn't walk away from him. The celebration stretched past midnight. Eventually, people began to drift home, drunk and happy, and full of gossip they'd be sharing for weeks. Old Thomas clapped Rowan on the back one last time. Martha kissed Alara's cheek and whispered that she'd never seen her so radiant. Even Sarah, who never had a kind word for anyone, admitted it was a fine match. Finally, the tavern emptied. Alara and Rowan stood in the doorway, watching the last stragglers disappear into the night. The mate marks had stopped glowing, but Alara could still feel the connection between them, a constant, thrumming awareness of his presence. We need to talk, she said quietly. I know. Really talk, not perform for an audience. I know. Rowan looked down at her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. Your cottage or the room I'm renting upstairs? You have a room? I always secure lodging before taking risky jobs. Force of habit. Alara's mind caught on that. Risky jobs. As if helping desperate healers fake mate bonds was something he did regularly. Upstairs, she decided. Because her cottage was full of family, and this conversation needed privacy. They climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor. Rowan's room was small but clean. A bed, a washstand, a chair, and a window overlooking the square. His pack sat in the corner, worn but well made. He lit a candle and turned to face her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Alara said, I need the truth. Who are you? And don't tell me you're just a traveler. Travelers don't move like you do. Don't command authority like you do. Don't make noblemen cower with a single look. Rowan was silent for so long she thought he might refuse to answer. Then he sighed and ran a hand through his dark hair. Sit. I don't... Please. She sat on the edge of the bed. He took the chair, putting a careful distance between them. My full name, he said slowly, is Rowan Blackthorn. Alara frowned. The name meant nothing to her. I'm from the Northern Territories, beyond the Ironwood Mountains. That's weeks of travel from here. I know. I've been on the road for 3 months. He leaned back, shadows playing across his face. I left home because I needed to see the realm. Understand it. Learn how people live beyond the borders of my land. Why? His jaw tightened. Because I'm expected to lead them. And I can't lead people I don't understand. The pieces clicked into place slowly. The authority, the confidence, the way he'd faced down Cedric without a flicker of fear. You're a lord, Alara breathed. Worse. Rowan's smile was humorless. I'm the Alpha King of the Northern Wolf clans. The room tilted. Alara stared at him, waiting for the punchline. For him to laugh and admit it was a joke. He didn't. That's not possible, she said faintly. It's the truth. The Alpha King he's a legend, a myth. Stories parents tell children about the fierce wolves who rule the frozen north. I assure you, I'm very real. Alara's thoughts spun. The Alpha King, ruler of the most powerful wolf clans in the realm, a man whose authority extended over thousands of warriors, whose word was absolute law in a territory the size of 3 kingdoms, and she'd asked him to pretend to be her mate in front of a border town tavern. Oh gods, she whispered. I hired a king to lie for me. But technically, I volunteered. This isn't funny. I'm not laughing. Rowan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I came to Thornwood looking for answers, for understanding. Instead, I found you. And now we're bound by something neither of us expected or wanted. Then we break it. We can't. There has to be a way. Alara. His voice was gentle but firm. A true mate bond can't be broken. Not by magic, Not by distance, not by will. It's permanent. So what? Bitterness crept into her voice. I'm just supposed to accept that I'm now tied to a king I don't know? That my life has been completely upended because of one desperate decision? I could ask you the same thing. Rowan's dark eyes held hers. You think this is easy for me? I have responsibilities, a kingdom, people depending on me. And now I'm bound to a woman who clearly wishes she'd never met me. The words stung more than they should have, because he was right. Hours ago, she'd been relieved to have solved her problem. Now she felt trapped. But looking at Rowan, at the tension in his shoulders, the weariness in his eyes, the mate mark on his throat that matched her own, she realized he was just as trapped as she was. Neither of them had asked for this, and neither of them could escape it. I'm sorry, Alara said quietly. You're right, this isn't fair to either of us. Rowan's expression softened slightly. No, it's not. So what do we do? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I have to return north, soon. My advisors will be looking for me. If I'm gone much longer, they'll send search parties. And me? That's your choice. He met her gaze steadily. The bond means we're stronger together, healthier. It will pull at both of us if we're apart for too long. But you're not a prisoner, Alara. If you want to stay here, continue your life as a healer, I won't force you to come with me. But as my mate, you'd be queen of the Northern Territories, of the wolf clans, of a people and a land you've never seen. He paused. It's not an easy life. It's harsh, demanding. You'd be expected to lead beside me, to make decisions that affect thousands, to be strong in ways you've never had to be. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to be honest. Rowan stood, crossing to the window. I won't lie to you, Alara, not about this. You deserve to know what you'd be choosing. Alara looked at his silhouette against the darkness, this stranger who was somehow her mate. This king who'd walked into her desperate plan and changed everything. Part of her wanted to refuse, to stay in Thornwood with her family, her healing work, her simple life. But another part, a part she hadn't known existed until today, wanted more. Wanted to see what existed beyond the borders of her small world. Wanted to know if she was strong enough to stand beside a king. I need time, she said finally, to think, to decide. How much time? I don't know. A few days? Rowan turned back to face her. I can give you 3. After that I have to leave. With or without you. 3 days. 3 days to decide if she would stay in the life she knew or step into something impossible. Alara stood, suddenly exhausted. I should go. My family will worry. I'll walk you. No. She moved toward the door. I need to be alone. She could feel his gaze on her back, heavy with unspoken words. Just before she left, she turned. Rowan? Yes? The promise you made. To protect me. Did you mean it? His eyes met hers, dark and utterly serious. Every word. Alara nodded once, then slipped out into the hallway. Behind her, the mate mark on her neck pulsed once, warm and insistent and impossible to ignore. In 3 days, everything would change again. She just had to figure out which change she could survive. The walk back to her cottage felt longer than it should have. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound sharper. Alara's hand drifted to her neck repeatedly, fingers tracing the raised pattern of the mate mark that refused to fade. 3 days. The weight of that deadline pressed against her chest like a stone. She slipped through the cottage door as quietly as she could, hoping everyone would be asleep. But her father sat by the dying fire, his gnarled hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. Papa. He looked up, and his weathered face creased into something between relief and concern. Thought you might not come home tonight. I needed to think. About your mate. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit with me, daughter. Let an old man ask some questions. Alara sank into the chair, exhaustion settling into her bones. Her father studied her for a long moment. You didn't know him before today, did you? The question landed like a blow. Alara's throat tightened. Papa, I'm not blind, Alara. Or stupid. His voice was gentle but firm. You've been here every day for 3 years. Working yourself to exhaustion trying to save us. There's been no mysterious stranger, no secret courtship, no time for anything but survival. Tears pricked Alara's eyes. I'm sorry. I just wanted to save the cottage. To save us. So you asked a stranger to lie for you? Yes. And the bond that appeared, the mark? That was real, her voice cracked. Neither of us expected it. We're as shocked as everyone else. Her father leaned back, his expression unreadable. The ancestors have a strange sense of humor. Papa, I don't know what to do. He's asking me to leave with him, to go north, to a life I can't even imagine. And you're afraid. Terrified. Of him? Alara considered that. Was she afraid of Rowan? Of the power he carried, the authority that radiated from him like heat from a forge? No, she said finally. I'm afraid of myself. Of making the wrong choice. Of losing everything I know. Her father reached across and took her hand. His grip was weak but warm. Let me tell you something about fear, daughter. It's useful when it keeps you alive, but it's a prison when it keeps you from living. What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough for what he's offering? Then you'll learn, you'll adapt, you'll survive. He squeezed her fingers. You've been doing it your whole life. This is just a different kind of survival. But what about you, Mama, Mira? We'll manage, we've always managed. His smile was sad but genuine. You've carried us long enough, Alara. Maybe it's time you carried yourself somewhere new. The words broke something open inside her. She'd been so focused on duty, on responsibility, on keeping her family safe, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to want something just for herself. I don't even know him, she whispered. You have 3 days to learn. The next morning dawned cold and gray. Alara woke with her decision still unmade and her heart heavier than before. She went through her morning routine mechanically, checking her mother's fever, preparing breakfast, organizing the herbs that needed drying. Normal tasks that felt strange now that everything had changed. Mira watched her from across the kitchen table. Are you going to see him today? I don't know. Everyone's talking about you two. Martha says she's never seen a bond mark so bright. Old Thomas thinks you'll have strong children. And Jamie's convinced if he stands near you, he'll find his own mate. Despite everything, Alara felt her lips twitch. Jamie's an idiot. A hopeful idiot. Mira hesitated. He's really a king? Alara's hand stilled on the mortar she'd been grinding. How did you... I listened at the door last night. Sorry. Mira didn't sound particularly sorry. Is it true? Yes. So you're going to be a queen. The word sounded absurd, impossible. Queens were distant figures in stories, women born to crowns and courts, not healers who mixed poultices in border town cottages. I haven't decided anything yet. But you're thinking about it. Mira's eyes were too knowing for 16. You want to go. I want... Alara stopped, frustrated. I don't know what I want. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to admit it. Before Alara could respond, someone pounded on the door. She opened it to find Martha, breathless and pale. You need to come. Now. What's wrong? There's been an attack. Raiders from the eastern wastes. They hit the Hendersons' farm at dawn. 3 dead, livestock stolen, barn burned. Ice flooded Alara's veins. The eastern wastes were harsh, lawless territory beyond the mountains. Raiders sometimes crossed into the borderlands during hard winters, but it had been years since they'd struck this close to Thornwood. I'll get my supplies. She grabbed her healing kit and followed Martha into the square. A crowd had already gathered outside the blacksmith shop, where the survivors had been brought. Alara pushed through to find Thomas Henderson lying on a makeshift cot, his chest wrapped in bloody bandages. His wife sat beside him, her face blank with shock. Their youngest son, barely 12, huddled in the corner with a gash across his forehead. Let me see. Alara knelt beside Thomas, carefully unwrapping the bandages. The wound was deep, possibly fatal if infection set in. She worked quickly, cleaning the injury, applying poultices, stitching where necessary. Around her, the crowd murmured about defenses, about sending word to the border garrison, about what this meant for Thornwood's safety. We should never have let our guard down. The garrison's spread too thin. They can't protect everyone. We need to organize patrols, arm ourselves. Alara focused on her patient, blocking out the rising panic. She'd just finished binding Thomas's chest when a commotion erupted outside. Rowan's voice, calm but commanding, cut through the noise. "Let me through." The crowd parted. He stepped into the shop, took one look at the scene, and his expression hardened into something cold and dangerous. "When did this happen?" he asked. "Dawn," Martha said. "Maybe 2 hours ago." "How many raiders?" 6, maybe 7. They were fast, gone before anyone could respond. Rowan crouched beside Alara, examining Thomas's wounds with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen combat before. This was deliberate, calculated, not a random raid. "How do you know?" Old Thomas demanded. "Because random raiders hit fast and run. They don't stick around long enough to do this kind of damage." Rowan stood, his gaze sweeping the room. They were sending a message. "What message?" Alara asked, though dread was already curling in her stomach. Rowan's eyes found hers. "That Thornwood is vulnerable, undefended, an easy target. The garrison is 3 hours away and understaffed." His jaw tightened. "I've seen this before in the Northern Territories. Small raids escalate, test defenses. Then they come back with more men and take everything." Fear rippled through the crowd. "So what do we do?" Martha's voice shook. "We're farmers and craftsmen. We can't fight off raiders." "You can if you're organized." Rowan turned to face them fully, and Alara saw the leader emerge. The king he'd been hiding beneath the traveler's disguise. "You need watches, patrols, a defensible position for your livestock and families, and you need someone to train your people to fight." "You?" Old Thomas's expression was skeptical. "No offense, son, but one man isn't going to make much difference." "One man who knows what he's doing can make all the difference." Rowan's voice carried absolute certainty. "I've defended territory against worse than Eastern raiders. If you let me, I can teach you how to protect yourselves." The crowd exchanged uncertain glances. Then a voice from the back called out, "Why should we trust you? You show up out of nowhere, claim to be Alara's mate, and now you want to tell us how to run our town?" Rowan's expression didn't change. "You shouldn't trust me. Trust makes you vulnerable. But you should listen to me. Because I know how to keep people alive in hostile territory. And right now, that's exactly what you need." "He's right." Alara stood, surprising herself. "I've seen him face down a nobleman without flinching. I've felt the authority he carries. If he says he can help, we should let him try." "Easy for you to say," someone muttered. "He's your mate. You're biased." "I'm practical," Alara shot back. "And I'm tired of watching good people die because we're too proud to accept help when it's offered." Silence fell. Then old Thomas sighed. "What do you need?" Over the next 6 hours, Rowan transformed Thornwood from a vulnerable border town into something resembling a defended position. He organized the men into watch rotations, taught them how to use farm tools as weapons, identified weak points in the town's perimeter, and directed construction of barricades. He moved with swift, decisive efficiency, and despite their initial skepticism, the townspeople responded. Because he wasn't just giving orders, he was showing them, getting his hands dirty, working alongside them. And slowly, grudgingly, they began to trust him. Alara watched from the apothecary, treating minor injuries as people worked. She saw the way Rowan commanded respect without demanding it, the way he adjusted his approach for different people, firm with the stubborn, patient with the fearful, encouraging with the uncertain. This was who he really was. Not the quiet traveler in the tavern. This was the Alpha King. And despite her confusion about their bond, despite her uncertainty about the future, she couldn't help but be impressed. As the sun began to set, Rowan found her in the shop. He was covered in dirt and sweat, his dark hair disheveled, but his eyes were sharp. "We need to talk," he said. "About?" "Those raiders will be back, probably within 2 days. They'll expect Thornwood to be just as vulnerable as before. When they find defenses, they'll either retreat or escalate. And if they escalate, then people will die." He leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion evident in the set of his shoulders. "I can help prepare the town, but I can't stay indefinitely. My people need me, and the longer I'm gone, the more dangerous it becomes for your kingdom," Alara finished. "Yes." She set down the herbs she'd been sorting. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying your 3 days just became 2. Because if the raiders return tomorrow night, I need to be here. But if they don't, I have to leave the morning after. 2 days. The deadline had just accelerated, and suddenly Alara felt the weight of her choice pressing down like a physical force. Before she could respond, Mira burst through the door. Alara, come quick! What's wrong? It's Cedric. He's back, and he's brought soldiers. Us. The square had filled with armed men wearing the livery of House Halloween. 20 of them at least, all carrying weapons, all looking like they knew how to use them. And at their center stood Cedric, his expression triumphant and cruel. Alara pushed through the gathering crowd, Rowan beside her. The mate mark on her neck pulsed hot, responding to the danger she could feel radiating from the nobleman. Cedric, she said, keeping her voice steady. What are you doing here? Collecting what I'm owed. His smile was vicious. You thought you could embarrass me? Make me look weak in front of your pitiful little town? I don't think so. The contract is void. You know that. I know you performed some kind of trick. Convinced everyone you'd found a mate bond. He gestured dismissively at Rowan. But I've been doing research, consulting with scholars, and do you know what I learned? Dread pooled in Alara's stomach. Mate bonds can be faked, Cedric continued. Rare, yes. Difficult, yes, but possible. Especially for a skilled healer with access to the right herbs and potions. That's not what happened. Prove it. Cedric's eyes glittered. Because from where I stand, you're a desperate woman who found a desperate man and cooked up a scheme to cheat me out of what's rightfully mine. The mark is real, Rowan said, his voice dangerously quiet. So you say. But marks can be painted. Magic can create illusions. Cedric pulled a scroll from his coat. I've petitioned the regional magistrate. He's granted me the right to collect my dowry by force if necessary, and to arrest both of you for fraud. The crowd erupted in angry shouts, but Cedric's soldiers moved forward, hands on their weapons, and the protests died. You have 2 choices, Cedric said. Pay the 20 gold sovereigns, or come with me to stand trial. Trial? Martha pushed forward. For what crime? Conspiracy to defraud. Use of illegal magic. Take your pick. Cedric's smile widened. Of course, if you pay, all charges disappear. The contract is settled, and everyone goes home happy. It was extortion, pure and simple. But Cedric had the law on his side, and 20 armed men to enforce it. Alara felt the trap closing around her family, around the entire town. We don't have 20 gold, she said quietly. Then I guess we're going on a trip. Cedric gestured to his soldiers. Take them both. The soldiers moved forward, and Rowan stepped in front of Alara. The shift in his posture was subtle but absolute. One moment he was a man. The next, he was something else entirely. Power rolled off him in waves, undeniable, overwhelming, terrifying. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing down on everyone in the square with crushing weight. The soldiers stopped dead. Several of them went pale, because they could feel it too. The presence of an alpha so dominant that every instinct they possessed screamed at them to submit. You've made a mistake, Rowan said softly. Cedric's confident expression faltered. What are you? I am Rowan Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, ruler of the Wolf clans, and you just threatened my mate. The words fell like thunder. Cedric stumbled backward. You can't be... The mark is real. The bond is real. And you've just committed an act of aggression against the Northern Crown. Rowan's eyes had gone completely black, reflecting no light. Drop your weapons. Dismiss your men, and leave, now, before I forget that border politics require restraint. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Cedric's soldiers began lowering their weapons. Some of them actually knelt, responding to the dominance radiating from Rowan like it was a physical command. Cedric looked around wildly. Get up. I order you to... Your orders mean nothing here. Rowan's voice dropped even lower. This is your last chance. Leave, or find out what happens when you challenge a king. Cedric's face went through several shades of red before settling on ash gray. He looked at Alara, at Rowan, at his kneeling soldiers. Then he turned and practically ran for his carriage. His men scrambled to follow, tripping over themselves in their haste to escape. Within minutes, the square was empty, of everyone except Thornwood's residents. Silence reigned for 3 long heartbeats. Then the crowd erupted. Questions flew from every direction. Demands for explanation. shock and awe and fear all mixed together. But Alara only had eyes for Rowan. He stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, his shoulders rigid, his hands clenched into fists. The power that had exploded from him moments ago was slowly receding, being pulled back under control with visible effort. When he finally looked at her, his expression was anguished. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "You revealed yourself." Alara's voice shook. "Why?" "Because he threatened you, and I couldn't—" He stopped, jaw working. "I swore to protect you. That wasn't a performance, Alara. That was a vow." The mate mark on her neck burned hot. Before she could respond, old Thomas cleared his throat. "So, you really are the Alpha King?" "Yes." "And our Alara is your queen." Rowan's gaze never left Alara's face. "If she chooses to be." The weight of those words settled over the square. Everyone was watching her now, waiting for her decision, waiting to see if the healer's daughter would claim a crown or walk away from destiny itself. But before Alara could speak, a cry went up from the eastern edge of town. "Fire!" Everyone turned. Orange flames licked the sky where the Henderson farm stood, the same farm that had been raided that morning, and silhouetted against the flames, a line of figures on horseback. 20 at least, maybe more. The raiders had returned, and this time they'd brought an army. Chaos erupted. People screamed, children cried. The able-bodied men grabbed whatever weapons they could find, pitchforks, axes, hammers, but Alara could see the fear in their faces. They weren't warriors. They were farmers, and the raiders flooding toward Thornwood were killers. "Get the women and children to the church," Rowan commanded, his voice cutting through the panic. "Barricade the doors. Old Thomas, take 10 men and defend the northern approach. I'll hold the east." "There are too many," someone shouted. "We can't." "We can." Rowan's eyes blazed. "Trust me. Do exactly as I say, and we'll survive this." Something in his voice, the absolute certainty, cut through the fear. People began moving. Alara grabbed his arm. "I'm coming with you." "No. You need to help the wounded. People will die tonight, Alara. They'll need a healer. And you'll need someone to watch your back." "I work alone." "Not anymore." She met his gaze steadily. "We're bonded, remember? That means we stand together, or the bond means nothing." For a heartbeat, she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded once. "Stay behind me. Do exactly what I tell you. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." They ran toward the burning farm, toward the approaching raiders, toward violence that Alara had never experienced before. She'd treated wounds from bar fights, farming accidents, difficult births. She'd never seen actual combat, never watched men try to kill each other. The raiders hit the eastern barricade like a wave against rocks. Rowan met them head on. Alara had thought she understood what he was, had seen glimpses of his power, his authority, his strength. She'd understood nothing. The man who'd sat quietly in a tavern, who'd kissed her with such careful control, who'd helped organize a town's defenses with patient efficiency, that man disappeared. In his place was a predator. Rowan moved through the raiders like death itself. No wasted motion, no hesitation, every strike precise and devastating. He didn't carry a weapon, didn't need one. His bare hands were enough. 3 men went down before the others even registered he was there. Then 5. Then 7. The raiders tried to surround him, tried to overwhelm him with numbers. It didn't work. Because Rowan wasn't human, not entirely. Not when the wolf rose to the surface and transformed him into something faster, stronger, more dangerous than any normal man could ever be. Alara watched in horrified awe as he tore through the enemy line, creating space for Thornwood's defenders to rally. Old Thomas and his men fought bravely, but it was Rowan who turned the tide. One of the raiders broke through, charging straight at Alara. She froze. Then Rowan was there, intercepting the man mid-stride. They went down in a tangle of limbs. The raider's knife flashed in the firelight. Rowan's hand closed around the man's wrist and twisted. The crack of breaking bone was audible even over the chaos. The raider screamed. Rowan stood, leaving the man groaning on the ground, and pulled Alara behind him. "I told you to stay back." "I did! Not far enough." More raiders pressed forward. But Thornwood's defenders were finding their courage, rallying around the king who fought for them. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, mercifully, the raiders broke. They retreated into the darkness, leaving their dead and wounded behind, fleeing from the town that should have been easy prey. Fleeing from the Alpha, who'd proven himself a force of nature. Silence fell over Thornwood, broken only by groans of the injured and the crackle of dying flames. Rowan stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, covered in blood, most of it not his own. His eyes were still black, still wild, still carrying the wolf too close to the surface. Alara approached him slowly. "Rowan." He turned, and for a moment she saw something feral in his gaze, something that didn't quite recognize her. Then it cleared. The humanity returned, and he sagged slightly, the adrenaline crash hitting him all at once. "Is anyone—" His voice was rough. "Did we lose anyone?" "I don't know yet. Let me check." She moved through the defenders, assessing injuries. Broken bones, deep cuts. One man with a stomach wound that would require careful attention, but no deaths. Not on their side. It was a miracle, or the result of having a king fight for them. As dawn broke over Thornwood, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Alara found Rowan sitting alone on the steps of the church. He'd washed the blood off but still looked exhausted, haunted. She sat beside him without speaking. "This is what my life is," he said quietly. "Violence, strategy, protecting my people at any cost." He looked at her, and his eyes were ancient, weary. "This is what you'd be choosing if you came with me. Not balls and pretty dresses and courtly politics. War, blood, decisions that cost lives no matter which path you take." "I know." "Do you?" His laugh was bitter. "You've lived your whole life healing people, Alara, making them better, saving them. I spend my days deciding which battles to fight, which allies to trust, which enemies to eliminate before they eliminate me. We're opposites." "Maybe that's the point." She reached out, taking his hand. It was warm despite the cool morning air. "Maybe the bond brought us together because we balance each other. Your strength, my compassion, your strategy, my healing. Or maybe the bond made a mistake." The words stung. But looking at his face, at the raw honesty there, the vulnerability he was offering her, Alara understood. He was afraid. Just like she was. Afraid of failing her. Afraid of dragging her into a life that would break her. Afraid that she'd choose him and spend the rest of her life regretting it. "The bond doesn't make mistakes," she said firmly. "My father told me that once. True mate bonds exist for a reason we can't always see. Maybe we're not supposed to understand it yet. Maybe we just have to trust it." "And do you? Trust it?" Alara looked at the man beside her. The stranger who'd become her mate. The king who'd protected her town like it was his own. The warrior who fought like a demon but looked at her like she was something precious. 2 days ago, she'd known exactly who she was. A healer. A daughter. A woman trying to survive in a harsh border town. Now she had no idea who she was, but she knew who she wanted to become. "I'm coming with you," she said. Rowan's head snapped up. "What?" "To the north. To your kingdom. I'm choosing the bond." Her voice strengthened. "I'm choosing you." "Alara." "I'm terrified," she continued. "I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll probably make a terrible queen, but if last night taught me anything, it's that I'm stronger than I thought. And I want to find out just how strong I can become." Rowan stared at her like she'd just offered him the world. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You won't regret this," he whispered against her hair. "I swear to you, Alara. I will spend every day proving you made the right choice." She pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat thunder beneath her cheek. This was insane, reckless. The most impulsive decision she'd ever made. But it felt right. The mate mark on her neck pulsed warm and bright, and she knew, somewhere deep in her soul, that this was exactly where she was meant to be. In the arms of a king. On the edge of a life she couldn't yet imagine. Ready to become someone she'd never dared to dream she could be. Behind them, Thornwood began to wake. People emerged from the church, from their homes, surveying the damage and counting their blessings. They'd survived, and their healer was about to become a queen, As the sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of night, Alara made a silent promise to herself. She would learn. She would adapt. She would become worthy of the crown she hadn't asked for and the mate who'd chosen to stand beside her, even if it killed her. Even if it killed her. The thought echoed in Alara's mind as she pulled back from Rowan's embrace and looked at the town she'd called home her entire life. Thornwood was battered but standing. Smoke still rose from the Henderson farm, but the people were already gathering to rebuild. They always did. Survival was in their blood. "We leave at noon," Rowan said quietly. "Can you be ready by then?" "I'll have to be." He studied her face with those dark, knowing eyes. "You're already questioning your decision." "No." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm just saying goodbye. There's a difference." The next 4 hours passed in a blur of activity that left Alara dizzy. She packed her belongings, pitifully few when she really looked at them, her healing tools, a few changes of clothes, the journal her grandmother had given her. Everything she owned fit into a single worn travel bag. Her mother wept quietly when Alara told her. Not from sadness, she insisted, but from pride and fear all tangled together. "My daughter, a queen," she whispered, touching Alara's face like she was trying to memorize it. "I always knew you were meant for something more than this little town." "Mama, hush. Let me say this." Her mother's hands trembled. "You have your grandmother's fire, her courage. She would have been so proud to see you claim a king." She pressed a small package into Alara's hands. "These belong to her. Wear them when you need to remember where you came from." Inside was a silver comb and a delicate chain with a blue stone. Simple things, precious because of who'd worn them. Mira helped her pack, chattering nervously to fill the silence. "You'll write, won't you? Tell me everything about the North, about the palace and the wolves and all of it." "Every week," Alara promised, though she had no idea if she could keep it. Her father said little, just pulled her into a crushing embrace and whispered, "You're the strongest person I know. Don't ever forget that." The words cracked something in her chest. By the time noon arrived, half of Thornwood had gathered in the square to see her off. Old Thomas brought a sturdy traveling cloak. Martha pressed a package of dried meat and bread into her hands. Even young Jamie, his head still bandaged from the raid, offered her a carved wooden charm for luck. "We'll miss you, girl," Thomas said gruffly. "Town won't be the same without you." "You'll manage." Alara forced a smile. "You always do." Rowan had somehow acquired horses, 2 strong northern breeds with intelligent eyes and steady temperaments. He checked the saddles with practiced efficiency, then turned to help Alara mount. She'd ridden before, but never for long distances. Never with the intention of leaving everything behind. The reality of what she'd agreed to hit her as she settled into the saddle. She was leaving. Actually, leaving. The cottage where she'd been born, the shop where she'd learned her craft, the people who'd known her since childhood, all of it would soon be nothing but memory. Rowan swung onto his horse with fluid grace, then guided it close to hers. "Last chance," he said quietly. "If you want to stay, I'll understand." Alara looked at him, this man who'd become her mate through desperate chance and impossible fate. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the reins just a little too tightly. He was afraid she'd change her mind. "I'm not staying," she said firmly. "I made my choice." Something in his face softened. "Then let's go home." Home. The word felt strange applied to a place she'd never seen. They rode north out of Thornwood as the church bells chimed noon. Alara didn't look back. She couldn't. If she did, her courage might fail. The first day of travel was hard. Her body wasn't accustomed to long hours in the saddle, and by evening her thighs ached and her back screamed protest. They made camp in a small clearing beside a stream, and Rowan set about building a fire with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything. "How long will it take to reach your kingdom?" Alara asked, wincing as she dismounted. 3 weeks if we push hard. 4 if we take it easy." He glanced at her. "We'll take it easy. You need time to adjust." "I'm fine." "You're in pain. I can smell it." Alara's eyebrows rose. "Smell it?" "Enhanced senses. Comes with the wolf." He offered her a half smile. "You'll get used to it, eventually." She settled by the fire, grateful for the warmth. The spring nights were still cold this far north. Tell me about them. Your people. What should I expect? Rowan was quiet for a long moment, feeding branches to the growing flames. They're strong, proud. They've survived in the harshest territory in the realm for generations, and it's made them hard, but loyal. Once you earn their respect, they'll die for you. And if I don't earn their respect, they'll make your life miserable until you do. His tone was matter-of-fact. The northern clans don't believe in coddling their leaders. You'll be tested, challenged. They'll want to see if you're worthy of standing beside me. No pressure, then. He looked at her across the fire, and his expression was serious. I won't lie to you, Alara. It's going to be brutal. My people have very specific ideas about what makes a strong queen, and you're not what they're expecting. What are they expecting? Someone born to power, raised in combat. A warrior who can fight beside me, not a healer who's never held a weapon. The word stung, even though she'd suspected as much. So I'm already starting from behind. No, you're starting from a different place. Rowan stood and crossed to her side of the fire, crouching so they were eye level. They're expecting a warrior. You're going to give them something better. A queen who can heal as well as protect, who understands suffering because she spent her life alleviating it, who has the strength to stand against a nobleman and the compassion to treat wounded raiders. His hand found hers. Trust me, once they see who you really are, they'll follow you anywhere. You have a lot more faith in me than I do. Then borrow mine until you find your own. That night, sleeping on hard ground with only a bedroll and Rowan's cloak for warmth, Alara dreamed of ice and wolves and a crown made of winter stars. She woke before dawn, disoriented and aching, to find Rowan already awake and watching the eastern horizon. Bad dreams? He asked without turning. Strange ones. The bond does that sometimes. Shares impressions, emotions. As we get closer to the north, it might get stronger. Alara wrapped the cloak tighter around her shoulders. What happens when we arrive? Is there some kind of ceremony? Announcement? Both. Rowan finally looked at her. The mate bond is sacred to my people. When an alpha finds their true mate, it's celebrated, but it's also political. Every clan leader will want to meet you, assess you. Some will support you immediately. Others will test you to see if you're strong enough. And if I fail their tests, you won't. How can you be so sure? Because you survived Thornwood. You made impossible choices under crushing pressure and came out stronger. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. That's all leadership is, Alara. Making hard choices when there are no good options. You've been doing it your whole life, you just didn't call it ruling. They rode through forests that grew denser and darker as they traveled north. The temperature dropped steadily. Snow appeared on distant peaks, and Alara found herself grateful for the heavy cloak the townspeople had given her. Rowan taught her as they traveled, how to read terrain for defensible positions, how to identify edible plants in the northern wilderness, how to move quietly through underbrush. Small skills that would have seemed absurd a week ago, but now felt desperately important. Why are you teaching me survival skills? She asked on the third day. I'm going to be a queen, not a scout. You're going to be both. Rowan adjusted his horse's pace to match hers. Northern queens don't sit in palaces issuing orders. They lead from the front, hunt with the warriors, patrol the borders. My mother once tracked a rogue bear for 3 days in the dead of winter and took it down herself. Alara nearly fell off her horse. Your mother did what? She was raised in the Ice Clans. They're the hardest of the northern territories. She believed a queen who couldn't survive the wilderness had no business ruling it. His expression grew distant. She died when I was 15. Border skirmish with raiders from the eastern wastes. She held them off long enough for the civilians to escape. I'm sorry. Don't be. She died doing what she believed in, protecting her people. His jaw tightened. That's what leadership costs sometimes. Everything. The weight of those words settled over Alara like snow. This was the world she'd chosen, where queens hunted bears and died in battle, where survival wasn't guaranteed and comfort was weakness. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something else stirring, something fierce and determined. If Rowan's mother could learn to rule the harsh north, so could she. On the 7th day, they crossed into the northern territories. Elara felt it before she saw it. A shift in the air, colder and sharper, carrying the scent of pine and snow and something wild she couldn't name. The trees changed too, growing taller and more ancient, their branches heavy with moss. "We're being watched," Rowan said quietly. Elara's hand instinctively moved toward the knife he'd given her. "Raiders?" "No, scouts. Mine." He let out a low whistle, 3 short notes that echoed through the forest. A moment later, figures emerged from the trees. 5 of them, moving with predatory grace. They wore leather armor reinforced with fur, and each carried weapons that looked well used and deadly. The lead scout was a woman, tall and muscular, with scars crossing her face like a map. Her eyes locked on Rowan, and she dropped to one knee. "Alpha King, we received word you were returning." Her gaze flicked to Elara, assessing and sharp. "And this is?" "My mate, Elara Vale." Rowan's voice carried absolute authority. "She'll be formally presented at the capital, but I want word sent ahead. Full honors, and anyone who shows her disrespect answers to me personally." The scout's expression didn't change, but Elara saw surprise flash in her eyes. "Understood, my king. We'll escort you the rest of the way." They rode with the scouts flanking them, and Elara felt the weight of their scrutiny like a physical thing. They were evaluating her, judging whether she was worthy of their king. She sat straighter in her saddle and kept her expression neutral. "That's Kira," Rowan murmured, "my head of security. She saved my life more times than I can count. Earn her respect, and half the kingdom will follow. And if I don't earn it, then you'll have a very dangerous enemy." Fantastic. They traveled for 3 more days with the scouts. Elara noticed how they moved, always aware, always watching, communicating in subtle gestures and quiet signals. These were warriors who'd spent their lives in hostile territory, who trusted no one and survived through constant vigilance, and she was supposed to lead them. On the 10th day, they crested a ridge, and Elara saw the northern capital for the first time. It was nothing like she'd expected. Instead of a grand castle or fortified city, it was a sprawling complex of stone and timber buildings, nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. Defensive walls ringed the outer perimeter, but inside she could see streets, markets, training grounds, even what looked like gardens. It was a fortress built to withstand siege, but designed for people to actually live in. "Welcome to Blackthorn Hold," Rowan said quietly. "Home." As they descended the ridge, people began to emerge from buildings. Word of their king's return spread like wildfire, and by the time they reached the main gates, hundreds had gathered. Elara felt their eyes on her, heard the whispers. "That's her? She's so small. I expected someone more." Her jaw tightened. She'd known this would happen, known they'd judge her and find her lacking. But knowing and experiencing were 2 different things. Rowan must have sensed her tension because his hand found hers. "Hold your head high. You're their queen whether they like it or not." She straightened her shoulders and met their stares with her own. They rode through the gates into a courtyard where more people waited. These were clearly important, dressed in fine furs and leather, wearing symbols of rank and authority. "Clan leaders," Elara guessed. An older man stepped forward, his silver hair braided in intricate patterns. His face was weathered but sharp, his eyes calculating. "Alpha King, the realm rejoices at your safe return." "Chancellor Aldrich," Rowan dismounted smoothly. "Let me introduce my mate, Elara Vale of Thornwood." Elara slid from her horse with as much grace as she could manage, very aware of how travel-worn and plain she looked compared to the assembled nobility. Aldrich's gaze swept over her, missing nothing. "Thornwood, a border settlement, if I recall, quite a distance from the northern courts." There was something in his tone, not quite dismissal, but close. "Distance is relative," Elara said evenly. "I found that strength isn't measured in proximity to power, but in the ability to survive where power doesn't reach." Silence fell. Then Aldrich's lips twitched. "Indeed. Welcome to Blackthorn Hold, Lady Vale. I'm sure you'll find our northern hospitality educational." It wasn't exactly a warm greeting, but it wasn't outright hostility either. Rowan's hand settled on her lower back as he guided her toward the main hall. "You handled that well. He doesn't like me. He doesn't know you yet. Give him time." The interior of the hold was warmer than she'd expected, with fires burning in massive hearths and tapestries covering the stone walls. Servants moved efficiently through the corridors, and warriors lounged in common rooms, their weapons always within reach. Rowan led her to a suite of rooms in the central tower. They were spacious and well-appointed, with windows overlooking the valley and a fire already crackling in the hearth. "These are yours," he said. "Well, ours, but you should have your own space until—" He stopped, looking uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. "Until we're actually ready to share a bed," Alara finished quietly. "Yes." Relief crossed his face. "The bond is real, but that doesn't mean we have to rush the rest. We barely know each other, Alara. I won't pressure you." The consideration in his voice made her chest tight. "Thank you." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There's a gathering tonight, to formally introduce you to the clan leaders. It's important. They need to see you beside me, accept you as queen." "Will they?" "Some will, some won't. But by the end of the night, they'll all know you're mine, and anyone who challenges that challenges me." After he left, Alara sank into the chair by the fire and let the reality of her situation wash over her. She was here, actually here, in the Northern Territories, in the home of the Alpha King, about to be presented as his queen to people who already doubted her. A knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. A young woman entered, carrying an armful of fabric. She was petite, with bright eyes and a friendly smile. "Lady Alara, I'm Senna. The king assigned me to help you prepare for tonight's gathering." "I don't need—" "With respect, my lady, yes you do." Senna spread the fabric on the bed, revealing a stunning gown in deep blue. "The clan leaders are expecting a border healer. We need to give them a queen." Over the next 2 hours, Senna worked miracles. She helped Alara bathe away the travel grime, dressed her in the gown that somehow fit perfectly, and arranged her hair in a style that was both elegant and practical. The silver comb from her grandmother provided the finishing touch. When Alara finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "You look like you belong here," Senna said softly, "like you were always meant to wear that crown." "I'm not wearing a crown. Not yet. But you will." Senna's smile was knowing. "The bond mark is enough for now. Everyone can see it. No one can deny it." Alara touched her neck where the swirling pattern still glowed faintly. "What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough for this?" "Then you'll get stronger." Senna squeezed her hand. "That's what we do in the North. We adapt or we die. And you don't look like someone who dies easily." The gathering was held in the Great Hall, a massive space with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with weapons and banners. Long tables had been set up, and the smell of roasted meat and spiced wine filled the air. Every clan leader in the Northern Territories had assembled. Alara counted at least 30 of them, each representing different regions, different traditions, different power bases. They all turned when she entered on Rowan's arm. The whispers started immediately, but this time they were different, because the travel-worn healer was gone, replaced by a woman who looked like she could command a room. Rowan led her to the head table and pulled out her chair. As she sat, he stood, and the room fell silent. "You all know why we're here," he began, his voice carrying to every corner. 10 days ago, I found my mate, my true mate, chosen by fate itself and marked for all to see." He gestured to Alara. "Alara Vale of Thornwood. Healer, survivor. And now, your queen." A few people raised their cups in salute. Most just watched, reserving judgment. Aldrich stood from his seat further down the table. A momentous occasion indeed. But surely the Alpha King understands that his people have questions. A mate bond is sacred, yes, but ruling requires more than a mark. His gaze fixed on Alara. "Tell us, Lady Vale, what qualifies you to lead the Northern Territories?" It was a direct challenge, designed to put her on the spot. Alara stood slowly, meeting Aldrich's eyes across the hall. "Nothing." Shocked silence. "I have no royal blood," she continued, her voice steady. "No training in statecraft. No experience commanding warriors or negotiating treaties. By traditional standards, I'm completely unqualified." She could see Rowan tense beside her, but she pressed on. "But I've spent my life making impossible choices with limited resources. Treating patients who should have died, keeping my family fed when there was no food, holding a border town together when it should have fallen apart. She paused. I've learned that leadership isn't about where you start. It's about what you do when everything's falling apart and people are depending on you to fix it. Pretty words, another clan leader called out. But words don't win battles or protect borders. You're right, they don't. Alara's gaze swept the room. But I watched your king defend my town against raiders, saw him transform frightened farmers into a coordinated defense, and I learned something important. Real strength isn't just about winning fights. It's about knowing when to fight and when to heal, when to push and when to show compassion. She looked at Rowan, at the mate mark on his throat that matched her own. Your king is a warrior, the best I've ever seen. But every warrior needs someone who can heal the wounds battles leave behind. Someone who understands that protecting your people means more than just keeping them alive. It means giving them something worth living for. The hall was completely silent now. So no, Alara finished quietly. I don't have traditional qualifications, but I have something else. The same thing that's kept the Northern Territories strong for generations. The will to survive, the courage to face impossible odds, and the determination to protect the people I'm responsible for, no matter what it costs. She sat down, her heart pounding. For 3 long seconds, no one moved. Then Kira, the scarred scout from the forest, stood and raised her cup. To the queen who speaks truth instead of flattery. A few others stood, then more. Within moments, half the hall was on their feet, cups raised, acknowledging her with grudging respect. It wasn't complete acceptance, but it was a start. Rowan's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. When she glanced at him, his expression was fierce with pride. Well done, he murmured. The gathering continued late into the night. Clan leaders approached one by one to introduce themselves, to assess her, to begin the delicate political dance that would define her reign. Some were openly hostile, others cautiously optimistic. A few seemed genuinely pleased. Alara met them all with the same steady composure, answering their questions honestly, refusing to pretend she was something she wasn't. By the time the hall finally emptied, she was exhausted but exhilarated. You won them over, Rowan said as they walked back to her chambers. Not all of them, but enough. That speech about healing and fighting, where did that come from? The truth. Alara stopped at her door, looking up at him. I meant every word. I know. That's what made it powerful. He reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, familiar, and it sent warmth flooding through her. You're going to make an incredible queen, Alara, even if you don't believe it yet. I'm starting to. His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes for the first time since they'd arrived. Good, because tomorrow the real work begins. What happens tomorrow? You meet the council, start learning our laws, our customs, our territories, and you begin your combat training. Alara's eyebrows shot up. Combat training? Every northern queen knows how to fight. It's not optional. His expression turned serious. This is a harsh land, Alara. Beautiful, but brutal. You need to be able to protect yourself, and if necessary, protect your people. She thought about his mother, who'd died defending civilians, about Kira's scars, about the warriors who moved through these halls with quiet confidence born of survival. Then teach me, she said firmly. Everything. I want to be worthy of them. Rowan's eyes blazed with something that might have been admiration, or pride, or something deeper that neither of them was ready to name yet. Starting at dawn, he promised. Sleep well, my queen. He left her at the door, and Alara entered her chambers feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She was here. She'd survived the first test. And tomorrow, she would begin transforming from Alara Vale the healer into someone new. Someone strong enough to stand beside a king and lead a kingdom through whatever storms were coming. She touched the mate mark on her neck, feeling it pulse warm beneath her fingers. The bond had brought her here. Now it was time to prove she deserved to stay. Now it was time to prove she deserved to stay. Dawn came cold and merciless, bleeding pale light through the narrow window of Alara's chambers. She woke to Senna shaking her shoulder gently, a steaming cup of something that smelled like pine needles and honey in her hand. Drink this. You'll need the energy. Senna's smile was sympathetic but firm. The king doesn't believe in easing people into training. He throws you into the deep water and watches to see if you swim or drown. Alara took the cup, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. And if I drown? Then you weren't meant to be queen. Senna's tone was matter-of-fact, not cruel. The North is honest about what it demands. Better to know now than discover your limits when lives depend on you. The words should have been frightening. Instead, they steadied something inside Alara. She appreciated the brutal honesty more than false comfort. She dressed in the leather breeches and reinforced tunic Senna provided, lacing sturdy boots that felt strange after a lifetime of simple shoes. The leather was supple but thick, designed to protect without restricting movement. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The gown from last night's gathering was gone, replaced by the practical armor of someone preparing for battle. She wasn't sure if that terrified or thrilled her, maybe both. The training yard was already full when she arrived, the pre-dawn air sharp with cold, and the metallic tang of frost. Warriors sparred in pairs, their movements fluid and deadly despite the icy ground. The clash of steel rang through the morning air like a harsh symphony, and Alara's stomach clenched with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Rowan stood in the center of it all, stripped to the waist despite the freezing temperature, his skin marked with old scars that told stories of survival she couldn't yet read. Steam rose from his shoulders in the cold air, and when he moved, every muscle shifted with predatory grace. When he saw her approaching, something softened in his expression, though his posture remained commanding. "Ready?" he asked, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "No, but I'm here anyway." His smile was approving, almost proud. "That's the only right answer. Confidence without skill gets you killed. Showing up despite fear, that's what keeps you alive." He gestured to a rack of wooden practice weapons lined against the stone wall. "We'll start with absolute basics. How to hold a blade without cutting yourself. How to move without tripping over your own feet. How to not get killed in the first 30 seconds of actual combat." The warriors training nearby had stopped to watch, their curiosity barely concealed. Alara felt their eyes on her like physical weight, judging, assessing, waiting to see if their new queen would embarrass herself and prove their doubts justified. She lifted her chin and walked to the weapon rack with as much dignity as she could muster. Her hand hovered over the practice swords before selecting one of medium length. The moment she lifted it, she understood why they called it practice. The wooden blade was weighted with iron in the core, making it heavier than she'd expected. The weight felt awkward and unfamiliar in her hand, foreign as a language she'd never learned. Rowan moved behind her, his presence warm against her back despite the cold morning. His hands covered hers, adjusting her grip with patient precision. "Like this. Firm but flexible. Your fingers wrap around the hilt, but your wrist stays loose. The blade is an extension of your arm, not a separate tool you're trying to control." His voice was low, meant only for her ears. "Everyone watching expects you to fail. Some want you to fail. Prove them wrong." For the next 2 hours, he drilled her relentlessly. Stance, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, weight balanced. Footwork, small steps, never crossing your feet, always maintaining that critical balance. Basic strikes. Overhead, horizontal, diagonal, each one practiced until her arms burned. Parries. Meeting an opponent's blade at an angle, redirecting force rather than trying to match it. She stumbled repeatedly, her feet tangling as she tried to move and defend simultaneously. Fell hard on the frozen ground twice, jarring her bones and bruising her pride. Got back up each time, jaw set, refusing to give the watching warriors the satisfaction of seeing her quit. The muttering from the observers grew louder as she struggled. "She's too slow. Look at that stance. A child could knock her over. The king's wasting his time. She won't last a week." Should have chosen someone who already knew how to fight. Anger flared in Alara's chest, hot and bright and energizing. She channeled it into her next swing, putting everything she had behind the strike. All her frustration, all her determination, all her desperate need to prove she belonged here. Rowan blocked it easily, his practice blade meeting hers with a solid crack that reverberated up her arm. But his eyebrows rose with something that might have been approval. "Good. Use that fire. But control it, channel it. Rage makes you strong for 3 seconds, then makes you sloppy and gets you killed. Anger is a tool, not a master." He pressed forward, forcing her to retreat, to think while moving. Defense isn't about strength. It's about angles and timing. You'll never be as physically strong as most opponents. Accept that. Use it. Make them commit to attacks that leave them vulnerable. Sweat soaked through her tunic despite the freezing air. Her muscles screamed. Blisters formed on her palms where the practice sword rubbed skin. But Alara gritted her teeth and kept going, kept trying, kept learning. When Rowan finally called a halt, the sun had fully risen and Alara's legs felt like water. Her hands trembled as she lowered the practice sword, and she had to consciously lock her knees to stay upright. But she was still standing, hadn't quit, hadn't given the doubters the satisfaction of watching her break. "Tomorrow, we go again," Rowan said, handing her a water skin. His own breathing was barely elevated, while Alara gasped like she'd run a marathon. "Same time, same intensity. Tomorrow?" Her voice came out hoarse, strained. "Every day, for as long as it takes." His expression was serious but not unkind. "I told you this wouldn't be easy, Alara. The North doesn't coddle its queens. You want to lead these people? You have to earn their respect. You have to become one of them. And that means suffering through the same training they endured." She wanted to argue, to say there had to be an easier way, a faster path. But looking at the warriors around them, their scars, their competence, their hard-won strength, she understood. There were no shortcuts to respect in this harsh land. "I'll be here," she said firmly. Something that might have been pride flickered in Rowan's eyes. "I know you will." That afternoon, bruised and aching in places she hadn't known could ache, Alara attended her first full council meeting. The council chamber was impressive, a circular room with a domed ceiling and windows that let in the pale northern light. 12 clan leaders sat around a massive oak table scarred with age and use, and Chancellor Aldrich presided from the head with the cool efficiency of someone who'd been managing politics for decades. They discussed border defenses, analyzing patrol routes and weak points in their territory, trade negotiations with southern kingdoms, debating the wisdom of dependency versus the reality of need, internal disputes between clans over hunting territories and water rights, conflicts that had simmered for generations without resolution. Alara listened more than she spoke, trying to understand the complex web of alliances and rivalries that held the northern territories together. Every clan leader had their own agenda, their own loyalties, their own definition of what served the realm best. Navigating those competing interests required a delicate balance of firmness and flexibility. "The southern kingdoms are pushing for new trade agreements," announced clan leader Brennan, a middle-aged man with shrewd eyes. "They want access to our iron mines, exclusive contracts." "At what cost to us?" demanded another leader, a fierce woman named Thyra with silver threading through her dark braids. "Favorable rates on their grain shipments. They're offering 20% below market price. We'd need less from our own harvest to feed the cities through winter, making us dependent on southern goodwill for survival. A foolish trade that gives them leverage over our very lives." Thyra's voice was sharp with contempt. The argument escalated quickly, voices rising as clan leaders took sides. Some saw the economic benefits. Others saw the strategic vulnerability. The debate grew heated, personal insults mixing with legitimate concerns. Rowan let it continue for several minutes, his expression neutral, before holding up a hand for silence. The room quieted immediately, a testament to his authority. "Alara," he said, his gaze finding hers across the table. "What's your thought on this?" Every eye turned to her. The weight of their attention was crushing. She'd been hoping to observe quietly for weeks before being thrust into actual decisions, to learn the rhythms of northern politics before contributing. But Rowan was testing her, deliberately putting her on the spot to see if she could think strategically under pressure and contribute meaningfully to decisions that affected thousands. Alara took a breath, organizing her thoughts. "How severe are our winters compared to southern kingdoms?" Aldrich frowned slightly. "Severe enough that we lose livestock and occasionally people if we're underprepared. Why does that matter?" "Because dependence works both ways," Alara said, leaning forward. "If we agree to the trade, yes, we rely on their grain when our harvests fall short. That's a vulnerability. But they rely completely on our iron. Every weapon in their armies, every tool their farmers use, every nail holding their buildings together, all of it comes from northern mines. There's no alternative source of equal quality within a month's travel." She paused, letting that sink in. If they anger us, if they break the agreement or try to use food as leverage, they lose access to the resources that keep their entire kingdom functional. Their economy collapses within a season. Ours adapts and survives because we've always survived harsh winters. They haven't. The council members exchanged glances. So the question isn't whether to trade, Ilara continued. It's what terms give us maximum leverage while protecting our people if the agreement falls apart. We should negotiate for guaranteed multi-year contracts on their side, but only commit to renewable annual terms on ours. We should require payment in gold, not credit, so we're not tied to their economic stability, and we should maintain our own grain reserves at current levels regardless of the trade. The southern grain supplements our supply, doesn't replace it. The room was completely silent. Then Thyra, who'd been most opposed to the trade, laughed, a short, sharp bark of approval. The girl thinks like a northerner, ruthless but practical. I think like someone who survived on limited resources, Ilara corrected carefully. It's not ruthlessness. It's understanding that every choice has consequences, and protecting your people means thinking 3 moves ahead of everyone else at the table. Aldrich's expression remained carefully neutral, but she saw calculation flickering in his eyes, reassessing her, adjusting his assumptions. An interesting perspective. We'll take it under serious advisement when we draft the counterproposal. Which wasn't agreement, but it wasn't dismissal either. It was acknowledgement that her input had value. The days blurred together after that, each one demanding more than the last. Training at dawn with Rowan, pushing her body past limits she'd thought were absolute. Council meetings in the afternoon, learning to navigate political currents as treacherous as any battlefield. Evenings spent studying Northern law and history with Aldrich, reading by candlelight until her eyes burned and the words blurred together. Senna brought her meals and helped tend her injuries, the deepening bruises, the blisters that formed and popped and reformed, the aching muscles that never quite had time to heal before the next day's training session began. You're pushing yourself too hard, Senna said one night, applying salve to Ilara's battered hands. Even northerners rest occasionally. I don't have time to rest. Ilara winced as the medicine stung. Every day I'm not competent is another day they doubt me. Another day I'm vulnerable. You're human, not invincible. There's a difference. In the north, I'm not so sure. But slowly, impossibly, Ilara felt herself changing in ways both visible and invisible. Her strikes grew faster as muscle memory replaced conscious thought. Her footwork steadied as balance became instinctive rather than deliberate. She learned to read an opponent's body language, the subtle shift of weight that telegraphed direction, the tension in shoulders before a strike, the momentary vulnerability after a committed attack. It wasn't graceful yet, wasn't beautiful like the fluid movements of warriors who'd trained since childhood, but it was effective, practical, survivable. And in the council chambers, she began to speak with increasing confidence, offering perspectives shaped by years of making hard choices with no good options, seeing problems through the lens of someone who'd had to be creative with limited resources. The clan leaders still challenged her frequently, still tested every assertion and questioned every conclusion, but there was grudging respect growing beneath the skepticism. Thyra started consulting her privately about resource allocation. Brennan asked her opinion on trade routes. Even Aldrich occasionally nodded approval at her suggestions. Progress. Slow and hard-won, but real. 3 weeks after arriving at Blackthorn Hold, everything changed in a single moment. Ilara was in the training yard sparring with Kira under Rowan's watchful eye. The scarred warrior was teaching her how to fight dirty, eye strikes, knee kicks, using an opponent's momentum against them. Pretty techniques get you killed, Kira said bluntly. Effective techniques keep you breathing. Ilara was concentrating on a particularly tricky disarm when a scout burst through the main gates at a dead run, her horse lathered with sweat and heaving for breath. Alpha King! The woman practically fell from her saddle, breathless and pale with urgency. Eastern border, massive raiding party, at least 200 strong, maybe more. They've already hit 3 settlements in 2 days. Ice flooded Ilara's veins, the practiced sword suddenly heavy in her hand. Rowan's entire demeanor shifted in an instant, from teacher to commander, his expression going cold and hard as winter stone. Casualties? Hi, my king. They're not raiding for supplies anymore. They're burning everything, killing everyone who resists. taking prisoners from those who surrender, the young and strong, moving fast and destroying everything in their path. Assemble the war council immediately. Rowan's voice carried across the training yard, and warriors snapped to attention. Kira, get our best fighters ready to move. Full combat gear. We leave within the hour. The hold erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors grabbed weapons and armor with practiced efficiency. Horses were saddled and loaded with supplies. Supply wagons were prepared with medical equipment and emergency rations. Alara found Rowan in the armory, strapping on leather and steel with the quick, economical movements of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. His face was set, focused, already mentally on the battlefield. I'm coming with you, she said. No. He didn't even look up, buckling the last strap on his chest plate. Rowan, this isn't a training exercise, Alara. This is war. Real combat against a force that outnumbers us and has nothing to lose. Men who kill for pleasure and profit. His jaw was set, immovable. You're not ready. 3 weeks of training doesn't prepare you for that reality. Then I'll never be ready by your standards. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. You said northern queens lead from the front, that they don't hide in palaces while their people die. Were you lying to me, making promises you never intended to keep? I was protecting you. I don't need protection. I need to be who you keep telling me I can become. Her voice shook with frustration and fear and determination all tangled together. Those settlements need healers as much as they need warriors. Maybe more. People are dying, Rowan. Children, families. I can help them. I can save lives while you're fighting. He stared at her for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Then his expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained hard. You'll stay behind the front lines at all times. You'll focus exclusively on healing. You'll have a personal guard who never leaves your side. And if I give you a direct order to retreat, you retreat immediately without argument. Understood? Agreed. I'm serious about this, Alara. His hands gripped her shoulders, his gaze intense. The bond goes both ways. If something happens to you, if you die, it will kill me too. Or break me so badly I might as well be dead. The entire northern realm depends on my leadership. I can't afford to be compromised. So you stay safe, for both our sakes. For the sake of everyone depending on us. The rawness in his voice shook her. She'd been so focused on proving herself, on becoming strong enough to lead, that she'd forgotten the bond tied them together in ways neither fully understood yet. His survival depended on hers just as much as the reverse. I'll be careful, she promised, meaning it. I swear to you, I won't take unnecessary risks. In war, all risks are necessary. But he pulled her close briefly, his lips brushing her forehead. Stay alive, Alara. That's all I ask. They rode out within the hour, 200 of the best warriors the Northern Territories could field, moving fast through terrain that grew increasingly harsh with every mile. The temperature dropped steadily as they traveled northeast. Snow appeared, first in scattered patches, then covering everything in a blanket of white that made tracking both easier and more treacherous. Alara rode beside Senna, who'd insisted on coming to assist with healing work. Around them, the warriors moved with grim determination, their faces set for battle, their weapons ready. These were people who knew what they were riding toward, violence and death, and the terrible choices combat demanded. On the second day of hard riding, they found the first destroyed settlement, or what was left of it. Alara had treated injuries before, seen blood and suffering in her years as a healer, watched people die despite her best efforts. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for this level of deliberate destruction. The buildings were burned to their foundations, still smoldering. Bodies lay in the snow, frozen in their final moments of agony and terror. The few survivors huddled in what remained of a barn, hollow-eyed and traumatized, flinching at any sudden movement. She worked through the night alongside Senna and the other healers who'd accompanied the war party, treating wounds that ranged from minor to catastrophic, setting broken bones with makeshift splints, stitching gashes that should have been fatal, doing what she could for people who'd lost everything, their homes, their families, their sense of safety. But there were too many injured, too much death, too much suffering for even the most skilled healers to fully address. When Rowan found her at dawn, her hands were still covered in blood, despite washing them repeatedly in the freezing stream nearby. She was working on an elderly man whose leg had been crushed, trying to save the limb even though amputation would be faster. "The raiders are heading north," Rowan said quietly, crouching beside her, "toward the Ice Clan territories. We can intercept them at the frozen pass. It's narrow, defensible. Our best tactical chance to stop them before they hit more settlements." "How many did we lose here?" Alara asked, not looking up from her patient. His face was grim in the pale morning light. 37 confirmed dead. 22 captured that we know of. The raiders took the strongest, probably as slaves for the eastern markets. Could be more we haven't found yet. Rage unlike anything Alara had ever felt flooded through her, hot and pure and clarifying. These were her people now, under her protection, under her responsibility. And they'd been slaughtered like animals, their lives considered worthless by raiders who saw them only as resources to exploit. "We're going to stop them," she said. It wasn't a question or a hope. It was a statement of absolute intent. "Yes, but it won't be easy. They have numbers and momentum. We have position, experience, and righteous fury." He touched her face gently, his fingers warm against her cold skin. "I need you to stay here. Help the survivors coordinate the healing efforts. You've done enough, more than enough." "No." Alara finished bandaging her patient and stood, wiping her hands on a cloth. "I'm coming with you to the frozen pass. Those raiders took prisoners, which means there are people who'll need immediate medical attention after we free them, if they're still alive. You'll need a healer on site, ready to work the moment the fighting stops. Every second could mean the difference between life and death for those captives. Alara, don't." She met his eyes steadily, seeing her own determination reflected in his concerned gaze. "You brought me into this world, Rowan. Into this life. You asked me to become a Northern Queen. Now let me do what Northern Queens do. Let me help save our people." Something in her voice, or maybe the way she said "our people" with such conviction, made him pause. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. "You stay with the rear guard. When the fighting starts, you stay back until it's completely safe. Your guards don't leave your side, understood?" "Understood." The frozen pass was exactly as its name suggested, a narrow canyon carved through ice and stone by ancient glaciers, with sheer walls rising 100 feet on both sides. It was the only viable route north for a force as large as the raiding party, without adding days of travel through worse terrain, which made it absolutely perfect for an ambush. Rowan positioned his warriors with the tactical precision of someone who'd fought in these mountains his entire life. Archers on the heights, where they could rain arrows down with impunity. Heavy fighters hidden behind ice formations near the canyon floor. Kira led a strike team positioned to hit the raiders from behind once they were fully committed to the pass and had no easy retreat. Alara waited with 10 warriors assigned specifically to protect her, along with all the medical supplies they could carry. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack bone. She'd never been in a real battle before, never watched people try to kill each other with the singular, focused intensity of combat. When the raiders entered the pass, they came confidently, arrogantly, 200 strong, moving in a loose formation that spoke of recent, unchallenged victories. Why would they expect resistance? They'd been conquering settlements for days without significant opposition. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the ice and shadows. Rowan gave the signal, a single raised fist that dropped in a sharp downward motion. Arrows fell like deadly rain, whistling death from above. Raiders screamed and fell, chaos erupting instantly as the ambush was sprung. Then the northern warriors emerged from their hiding places, crashing into the raiding party with brutal efficiency and controlled violence. It was chaos, beautiful and terrible, and absolutely devastating in its effectiveness. Rowan fought at the front, and Alara watched him transform completely into the predator she'd glimpsed in Thornwood. But this was different. This was his full power, unleashed in his own territory, the Alpha King defending his land and people with every ounce of strength, skill, and primal dominance he possessed. He was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably less than 30 minutes. The raiders tried desperately to retreat, but Kira's team blocked their escape route, emerging from concealment at precisely the right moment. Trapped in the pass, outnumbered now by superior tactics and terrain advantage, Facing warriors who fought with the fury of people defending their homeland, the raiding party broke. Some surrendered, throwing down weapons and begging for mercy. Others fought to the death, preferring that to capture. When the last raider fell, silence descended over the frozen pass, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the ragged breathing of exhausted warriors. "Healers forward!" Rowan's voice rang out, commanding and clear. Alara grabbed her supplies and ran, her guards surrounding her as they navigated through the aftermath. The next hours blurred into a nightmare of triage and desperate medicine. She moved from patient to patient, northern warriors and surviving raiders both, treating injuries without discrimination or judgment. A blade wound cared nothing for which side wielded it. Pain was pain, suffering was suffering. And a healer's oath didn't include political considerations. She worked until her hands shook with exhaustion and her supplies ran dangerously low, moving on instinct and training. That's when she found them. The prisoners. 22 people, mostly young adults and teenagers, huddled in makeshift cages built from scavenged wood and rope. They were in terrible condition, beaten and starved, their eyes hollow with trauma. When they saw the northern warriors approaching with bloodied weapons, several screamed, expecting execution, or worse. "We're here to help," Alara called out, pushing past her guards to reach the cages. "You're safe now. The raiders are defeated. You're going home." She unlocked the cages herself, her hand steady despite the horror of what she was seeing. Started treating their wounds immediately. Malnutrition, exposure, infected injuries from rough handling, offering water and warmth and the first kindness they'd experienced in days. Many were from settlements she'd never visited, places she'd only heard mentioned in council meetings. But they were Northern Territory, her territory now, her people. One elderly woman grabbed Alara's hand with surprising strength despite her weakened condition. "You're the new queen. The healer, they say, married the Alpha King out of nowhere." "Yes. Some say you're soft, that you'll never survive the North because you weren't born to it." The woman's eyes were fierce despite her injuries and exhaustion. They were wrong. They were fools. Alara felt something break open in her chest. Acceptance, real and hard-won. Not given freely, but earned through blood and action and showing up when it would have been easier to stay safe. "We take care of our own," she said quietly, meaning every word. "That's what it means to be Northern. That's what it means to be queen." By the time they made camp that night, Alara was running on pure determination and stubborn will. Her body screamed for rest, but there was one more thing she needed to do. She found Rowan standing at the edge of camp, staring out at the frozen landscape that stretched endlessly under the stars. Blood stained his armor and clothes, though he'd washed his hands and face. He seemed physically unhurt, but emotionally distant, processing whatever internal accounting commanders did after battle. "It's done," he said without turning, somehow sensing her approach. "The raiders are scattered or dead. The prisoners are freed. We'll send patrols to make sure none regroup, but the immediate threat is over." "How many did we lose?" 18 warriors killed, another 30 wounded, though most will recover. His voice was carefully neutral, but she heard the weight beneath it. "It could have been much worse. Should have been worse given the numbers. But it still feels like too many. 18 people who'd fought under his command, who'd trusted him to lead them to victory. The weight of those deaths settled over both of them like falling snow." Alara moved to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his without speaking. Sometimes silence was the only adequate response to loss. After a long moment, Rowan said quietly, "You came with me, against my initial wishes, against common sense and safety. You walked into a war zone to help people you'd never met, risking the bond and everything it represents. They're my people too. The moment I accepted this bond, I accepted responsibility for them." She tightened her grip on his hand. "I couldn't stay back while they suffered. Wouldn't have been able to live with myself. You could have died. One stray raider, one moment of chaos, and everything ends. The bond, the kingdom, all of it." His voice was rough with suppressed emotion. "So could you." She touched his face, feeling the scratch of stubble beneath her fingers. "The bond goes both ways, remember? If something happened to you, I'd be just as destroyed, maybe more, because I'd blame myself for not being there." His arms came around her suddenly, pulling her against him with desperate strength that belied his controlled exterior. She felt him shaking slightly, The aftermath of battle and fear and relief all crashing down at once now that the immediate crisis had passed. "I've commanded warriors for 15 years, he whispered against her hair. Led them into battles where death was certain, watched friends fall, made decisions that cost lives. But I've never been this terrified as I was today, knowing you were here, vulnerable, and I couldn't protect you every second. I'm here. I'm safe. We both are." She held him tightly. "We survived. Our people survived. That's what matters." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the frozen darkness while the camp settled around them and the northern lights began their dance across the sky. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan's expression had changed. There was something fierce there now, something that looked like pride and love and acceptance all tangled together into something new and powerful. "You're ready," he said with absolute certainty. "Ready for what?" "To be formally crowned. To stand before the entire northern realm as their queen." His thumb brushed her cheek gently. "You've earned it 10 times over. Proven yourself in ways most queens never have to. Now it's time everyone else recognized what I already know, that you're exactly what this kingdom needs." The coronation was held 1 month later, after they'd returned to Blackthorn Hold and proper arrangements could be made. The great hall had been transformed into something magnificent, banners from every clan hanging from the rafters, candles and torches creating a warm glow against the stone, winter flowers arranged despite the season's harshness. Every clan leader attended in their finest ceremonial dress. Every warrior who could be spared from border duty, representatives from settlements across the territory, many who'd traveled for days to witness this moment. Alara wore a gown of white and silver that Senna had helped create, the fabric shimmering in the candlelight like fresh snow under moonlight. Her hair was braided in the intricate northern style she'd finally mastered, each twist and loop carrying symbolic meaning. The silver comb from her grandmother gleamed among the braids, a deliberate reminder of where she'd come from, the humble roots she refused to hide or be ashamed of. Rowan stood beside her, regal in dark leather and fur trimmed with silver, the crown of the northern territories resting on his head. He looked every inch the king he was, powerful, commanding, absolutely certain. Chancellor Aldrich stepped forward, carrying a second crown on a cushion of deep blue velvet. It was smaller than Rowan's, but no less impressive. Silver worked into the intricate shapes of wolves and winter stars, delicate yet strong. "Alara Vale of Thornwood," Aldrich's voice rang through the packed hall, carrying to every corner. "You came to us as a stranger, unknown, untested, without bloodline or training. Many doubted you could survive in our harsh land, let alone lead it." Alara kept her expression neutral and composed, though her heart raced. This was the moment everything had been building toward. "You proved us wrong." Aldrich's stern face softened almost imperceptibly, the closest thing to a smile she'd ever seen from him. "You fought beside our king when you could have stayed safe, healed our wounded when others would have fled, saved our people when it would have been easier to protect only yourself. You've shown courage in battle and wisdom in peace, strength tempered with compassion, strategy balanced with mercy." He lifted the crown carefully. "You've earned the respect of the clans, not through birthright or political maneuvering, but through action and sacrifice, through proving your worth every single day." The hall was completely silent, hundreds of people holding their breath. "Do you swear to protect the Northern Territories?" Aldrich asked formally. "To lead with both strength and compassion? To stand beside your mate in all things, through hardship and triumph, through peace and war until death claims you both?" "I swear it." Alara's voice carried clear and strong, no hesitation or doubt. "Then by the power vested in me by the assembled northern clans, witnessed by the people of this realm, I name you Alara Blackthorn, Queen of the Northern Territories, alpha female of the Wolf clans, protector of the realm, guardian of the frozen lands." He placed the crown on her head with reverent care. The weight of it was considerable. Real silver, real responsibility. But Alara didn't bow beneath it. She stood straight, spine rigid, chin high, meeting the eyes of the assembled crowd with steady confidence earned through trial and transformation. Rowan took her hand, raising it high above their joined heads. "Your queen!" The hall erupted. But it wasn't the polite applause of political obligation or the forced cheers of people following protocol. It was genuine celebration, raw and loud and joyful. Warriors banged their fists on tables until the wood shook. Clan leaders stood and roared approval. Common people cheered and stamped their feet. Even Aldrich permitted himself a small, genuine smile. Because they'd witnessed her journey firsthand, watched her transform from uncertain healer to confident leader, seen her prove herself through trial and blood and unwavering determination. She hadn't asked for a crown to be given. She'd earned it through sacrifice. The celebration lasted deep into the night. Clan leaders approached to offer formal congratulations and not-so-subtle assessments. Warriors raised toasts to her courage. Common people thanked her for the hope she represented, proof that anyone, regardless of birth, could rise through merit and determination. Later that night, after the celebration had finally wound down and the hall had emptied except for servants cleaning up the remnants of the feast, Alara and Rowan stood on the balcony overlooking Blackthorn Hold. The northern lights danced across the sky in ribbons of green and silver and violet, painting the snow-covered landscape in otherworldly beauty. "Do you regret it?" Rowan asked quietly, his arm around her waist. "Leaving Thornwood? Everything you knew? The simple life you had?" Alara thought about the small cottage with its herb garden, the familiar faces and comfortable routines, the predictable rhythm of a healer's life in a border town where the biggest challenges were difficult births and seasonal illnesses. It felt like a lifetime ago, like a different person had lived that life. "No," she said honestly, leaning into his warmth. "I miss my family, miss the simplicity sometimes, the certainty of knowing exactly what each day would bring. But this..." She gestured to the territory spread below them, to the crown resting on her head, to the mate mark that bound them together. "This is where I'm meant to be, who I'm meant to be. I can feel it." The desperate healer who hired a stranger in a tavern? She laughed, the sound carrying in the cold night air. "That seems impossible now, like a story someone made up, like it happened to someone else entirely." "It's my favorite story." Rowan pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her protectively. "The one where a brave woman made the most reckless decision of her life and accidentally claimed a king, changed the course of an entire kingdom through desperate courage. I think the king claimed me first. The bond claimed us both." He pressed a kiss to her temple, gentle and reverent. "And I've never been more grateful for fate's intervention, for whatever cosmic force brought you to that tavern on that specific day." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the lights dance and the stars wheel overhead, the king and queen of the Northern Territories, bound by chance and sealed by choice. 3 months ago, Alara had been desperate and alone, facing humiliation and ruin with no clear path forward. Now she wore a crown forged from winter stars, led a kingdom that had accepted her despite every reason to reject her, stood beside a mate who looked at her like she'd hung those dancing lights in the sky herself. The journey from healer to queen hadn't been easy. It had been brutal, demanding, unforgiving. It had stripped away every certainty she'd held about herself and rebuilt her into something stronger, tested her in ways she hadn't known were possible, forced her to discover reserves of courage and determination she hadn't known existed. But standing here with Rowan's arms around her and her people celebrating below, and the northern lights painting impossible beauty across the sky, Alara knew one thing with absolute certainty. She'd do it all again in a heartbeat, every painful step, every moment of doubt, every terrifying choice. Because sometimes the most desperate decisions lead to the most extraordinary destinies. Sometimes the stranger in the tavern is exactly who you needed to find all along. And sometimes the woman who thought she was nothing more than a simple healer discovers she's been a queen the entire time. She just needed the courage to claim it. Far to the south, in a border town called Thornwood, a young girl sat by her family's fire listening to her mother tell stories to pass the long winter evening. "Did I ever tell you about Alara Vale?" her mother asked, voice warm with affection and pride. "The healer who became a queen? You've told it 100 times, Mama. Then once more won't hurt. They say she hired a stranger to save her family from ruin and ended up saving an entire kingdom in the process. Is it really true? All of it?" Her mother smiled, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "Every single word, and they say she still visits Thornwood sometimes, wearing her crown and riding beside the Alpha King, proving that courage and determination can change your entire world. That where you start doesn't determine where you end up. The little girl's eyes shone with wonder and possibility. I want to be like her when I grow up. Then be brave, her mother said, touching her daughter's face gently. Be bold. Never let anyone tell you you're not strong enough or worthy enough, because you never know. The next impossible decision you make might just change everything, might transform you into someone you never dreamed you could become. And in the north, beneath dancing lights and winter stars, a queen stood beside her king on a balcony carved from ancient stone. And the realm was infinitely better for her presence. The end of one journey, the beginning of another, but always, always, proof that courage could overcome any obstacle, that love could bridge any divide, and that sometimes the most powerful magic in the world was simply refusing to give up when everyone expected you to fail.